welcome to another episode of the Between Podcast. You're here. You made it. You put your headbuds, earphones, you put the things on your ears or around your ears or in your ears, or maybe you just turned up your car radio, or perhaps you're listening on an old-timey some sort of console musical stereo that you've got set up on a shelving system in your dorm room like I did in 1996. I don't know where you're listening, how you're listening, but I'm really glad you're here. I'm Matt Matson. I'm the person who normally hosts, and lately we've had a co-host. That's the Reverend Dani Hillyer, who is here with us. Say hi, Dani. Say hi to everybody who's listening.
Hello, everyone. Honored to be here today.
Yes. If you're watching, you get to see our faces. If you're listening, you can just listen. That's most of you are just listening, and that's fine. We're going to talk about profits today. Not earning more profits. This is not an entrepreneurial success podcast. This is a podcast that typically explores concepts at the intersection of faith. And by the way, we really do mean a wide-ranging faith, whatever that means for you. But we explore concepts that live at the intersection of faith and human connection. We really believe in the power of sacred human connection. And today, our show is not any different. It really is about that, but we're going to kind of take a different approach in that Dani and I both read a book. And so we're going to do a book report on the book that we just read. We're really excited about this book that we were reading together. This is Richard Rohr's new book called The Tears of Things. If you're not familiar with Richard Rohr, get familiar with Richard Rohr. He is, if there's anybody I could recommend who, as an author for you to read, to explore a totally different, maybe a different way of approaching faith, God, Jesus, Christianity, than probably the way you approached those topics as a kid or as you were growing up or even in your faith now. I am a huge fan of Richard Rohr. He is a Franciscan friar, lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and runs and started this this faith community down there, kind of this faith and learning community called the Center for Action and Contemplation. Has written a bunch of books. The Universal Christ, I think, is his most recent book. I just noticed literally randomly that I've got The Divine Dance, one of Richard Rohr's books, sitting right next to me. This is one of my favorites. In this book, we're not talking about this book today, but this book, he talks about the Trinity and like explains the Trinity in a way that I'd never encountered it before. Everything I read of Richard's is like a new encountering of an old idea, and it's really beautiful. And so this newest book, The Tears of Things, is about the biblical prophets. Dani, who are some of the biblical prophets? Let's do a little seminary quiz for Dani. Dani named 3 biblical prophets. Okay, she's going with Isaiah first. Good.
Major or minor prophets?
Oh, wow. Okay. Ooh. Gosh, you know what? Any medium prophets?
Medium prophets. New category. Dun dun dun. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel.
So many good ones.
Oh, and then my brain stopped. So there's 3.
Which is why we keep reading books. And why we keep talking about it. That's fun. So this book is about prophets. And in the description of the book, Rohr or his publicist or somebody writes, we're not talking about prophets on the street corner holding a sign and shouting at you. But as you read the book, I mean, maybe we kind of are. At least for a little bit. Rohr talks a lot about the journey all of these ancient prophets went on emotionally and in their own spiritual maturation. Kind of all of them start angry and shouting at a street corner or the equivalent thereof. And they move through a period of tears, a period of sadness, a period of mourning, big issues, big ideas, mourning the world around them. And then they move into some other period of revelation and hope. And this pattern repeats itself in all of the prophets. And Rohr lays that out for us in this really beautiful, really provocative, and really applicable and practical and relevant way for today's world. So I'll stop talking for a minute. Dani, you noted that there was a poem at the beginning of this book that really struck you, and I thought maybe that would be a good way for us to start.
Yes, this poem, since I opened this book, um, I have not stopped reading this poem. I think I've read it almost every day for like the last 3 weeks, and especially being in this liturgical calendar time of the Lenten season, this deepening for me. This has just been such a profound poem. I hope I pronounce her name correctly. It's Rosemary Watola Traumer. Apologies if I pronounce that incorrectly, but the title of this poem is For When People Ask. All right, let's prepare our hearts to listen to this. For when people ask, I want a word that means okay and not okay. More than that, a word that means devastated and stunned with joy. I want the word that says, I feel it all at once. The heart is not like a songbird singing only one note at a time, more like a Tuvan throat singer, able to sing both a drone and simultaneously 2 or 3 harmonics above it. A sound that Tuvans say that gives the impression of wind swirling among rocks. The heart understands swirl, how the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an insistent breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves, blesses us with paradox, so that we might walk more openly into this world so rife with devastation, this world so ripe with joy. I have reflected day after day upon this poem because just as it says, I feel it all at once. I don't know, Matt, if you've noticed, but life in this journey, in this pilgrimage journey of life that we are on together, we have days that are hard. We have days that are not so hard, but in all of those days, we hold tension of both and that there's moments of incredible joy followed by immediate devastation, that sometimes we're hugging our friends who are in their darkest seasons of life while we're trying to celebrate, the mountaintops of successes that we've just achieved. And how do we learn to hold space for both of those? And something in this poem that I hope I pronounced it correctly, by the way. I had to Google what a Tuvan or a Tuvan throat singer was. If you Google it, it's beautiful because it says the heart's not like a songbird. You hear the birds of the air, 1 or 2 pitches, but like a throat singer, I'm not even going to attempt to do it on here. But the levels of harmonics, the pitches, the offering that is truly like this swirling sensation as you're listening to it. That's life. That is our human experiences. And I feel as though people feel like they can only respond to how are you with either I'm good or I'm not good, or I'm okay or I'm not okay, when the reality is that we're not experiencing this linear life at all. We are very much in the swirling of all emotions that coexist together.
Yeah. I think this is something that Rohr explores in all of his writings and in his theology is this uncertainty, the truth of paradox, the reality of non-duality is language that he uses a lot in his writing, and this poem perfectly captures is this all is true all at once ness of things, that hurt and joy can live on the same plane, and for everybody we encounter those things are real. And maybe for the God of the universe, all those things are real also. I think part of the point of this book is that all these prophets, the Bible's full of all these prophets. Some books of the Bible are named after prophets, and others have prophets kind of woven into the stories and woven into the scripture. And all of these prophets seem to be doing this, Danny. They seem to
Mhm.
be saying at once, everything is horrible and everything is wonderful and God is
Mhm.
good. And it is not, to a point that I know you've made. This is not about toxic positivity. This is not about saying everything. Just believe and just smile a little harder and you'll find happiness inside. That's not what this is about at all. No, it's about all that pain that you might
Mhm.
feel, maybe in the world right now, all the uncertainty, all the weirdness, all the I've like just mess and mud that the society that we live in seems to be stuck in is true. And you can have a good day. And
Mhm.
you can notice a wildflower popping up in the spring grass and find joy in it. And you can
Mhm.
have an encounter at a coffee shop that makes all the noise from the outside world disappear for a little while because
Mhm.
time felt like it stood still in that sacred interaction. All of those things can be true all at once. And this book, The Tears of Things, offers a perspective about how maybe these prophets can go from the the darkness and the mud and the bad to the holy, holy, holy,
Mhm.
hallelujah celebration, and in the span of just a few pages. you know,
Mhm.
like how can that happen? So, Danny, I'm curious about your reflection on this, but the book is sort of outlined as though every prophet goes through these stages: a stage of anger, a
Mhm.
stage of tears, and a stage of compassion. And that compassion is where all of them ultimately land: anger, tears, compassion.
Mhm.
And I think about, in this moment, societally, we're noticing people taking to the streets angry, posting on social media angry,
Mhm.
shouting at the injustices they see around them angry.
Mhm.
And it always strikes me anytime we're in a period like that, that's never going to get us where we want to get to. The anger will never get us there. And Rohr
Mhm.
outlines in this book and talks about through the prophets that it's not until they go through a period of tears, of breaking down, of feeling fully the sadness that is part of reality, that the tears themselves can maybe wash away the blinding rage of anger and allow the prophets to see through new lenses, tear covered lenses that offer a perspective on the world that is wholly compassionate and wholly graceful and wholly forgiving, even. And that pattern, anger, tears, compassion, becomes this repeated pattern and maybe even a model for spiritual development that each of us might have to go through over and over and over the course of our lives. I'm curious about your read of that anger, tears, compassion pattern that's in this book, Danny.
I think you nailed it right there. Of one, it gives us permission as people living in 2025 to recognize that these human emotions have been from the very beginning. These angers of injustices in the world, the angers of the systems of oppression, the corruption that we see is nothing new. And while that should offer a little bit of, we're not alone, it also has that other layer of frustration that, wow, we're still working on these systems that are in place. We're still working on what it looks like to serve mercy and justice day in and day out. And I think there is an immediate response for anger, because what is it that the psychologists say, and you might have heard it as well, that anger's not like the real emotion. It's
Mm-hmm.
not truly what we're feeling, but it's the most, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the most acceptable, even though it's unacceptable, right? We have this like, oh, anger is not acceptable, yet societally it's so acceptable. It's our first response.
Yeah.
Whereas what I think Rohr is pulling out of the prophets specifically is that it's not the anger at all. It is the tears. It is these deep losses, these longings for mercy and justice and forgiveness and righteousness in our world that seems so broken, but is still so beautiful. We have tears that we mask with this anger and frustration. I mean, I see myself daily have moments of immediate frustration or immediate, like, I just want to like scream. But then when I slow myself and get in line with my breath and get in line with the present moment, I'm like, no, I'm very sad right now. I'm sad for myself. I'm sad for other people. I'm sad for uh, the reality of how devastating life can be. So I love that Rohr emphasized that the anger is always the first. The fist is always the first, like, jolt reaction, knee jerk reaction that we have to any situation. But the reality is we're hiding our tears because for some reason, tears aren't acceptable.
Man, that is two big things for me. Anger, anger is the first reaction. It's not wrong. In
Mm-mm,
fact, every prophet starts. I mean, that is such a powerful concept. Every prophet in the Bible starts at some
angry.
point angry, like raging,
Mm-hmm,
like waving a fist, angry, and then and then uh, at some point somehow they're brought to tears. And this is the other reality for me is that if we can do this for people, if we can be a safe place for people, I don't mean we, you and me in between. I mean like we human beings with our neighbors, with the people that we're going to a coffee shop with later today, or we're with our kids or with our parents who maybe we haven't had a deep conversation with in a long time for a lot of reasons, or maybe with your your coworker who you don't get along with very often. Like maybe if we can be a bridge for people to
mm-hmm.
allow them to move from anger to tears. And I don't mean like go out and try to make people cry, but try to create a safe encounter with people where they might be able to dig underneath the anger that's on the surface to find out what's underneath. Man, that is a transformational gift to give to somebody in the midst of an interaction, in the midst of a
Mm-hmm.
relationship, to be able to create an opportunity for them to see underneath the anger, to access the tears, metaphorical or actual, that might cleanse their vision and help them see through a more compassionate lens. What a powerful thing to know that the great prophets of the Bible, of thousands and thousands of years ago, all went through that experience, and Rohr kind of lays that out for us. Dani, I'm curious about your relationship with the word prophet. Um,
Mm.
are you a prophet? Do you think prophets are around you? Do you encounter prophets like modern day? Is that a word? Is that a word that only belongs uh, in application to old people from the Bible? Like what is a prophet today? What does that word even mean?
Yeah. I think about this, and who immediately comes to my mind and should immediately come to most people's mind, especially living in the United States of America, is Martin Luther King Jr.
Mm,
Immediately, I think of him. Uh, and the same kind of thing. Look at the anger. And I would say his anger was righteous, it was justifiable, uh, it was necessary. to make those movements within the civil rights movements. So I immediately think of him, and I don't think, the prophets aren't just, these old dead guys. I think every day we encounter uh, prophecies, we encounter prophetic people, uh, and even prophets. And I think there's like this weariness as well, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but there are false prophets too. There are people claiming that they are prophet. They're speaking prophetically into the world. Usually, usually those are the people on the street corners with megaphones and big banners that are raging hate and raging uh, their rage out into the world. Now that is also just Dani speaking as Dani, but I do think that there are prophetic voices, there are false prophecies happening in our world. But one that I immediately think of that is huge is Martin Luther King Jr. And then the ones that, followed in his civil rights movement, like Malcolm X and James Cone, these theologians who also held space for those, that rage, that frustration, and also leaned into the tears and the compassion. Because if you read, there's all types of liberation theologies, if we want to get into the depths of that. But when you read about liberation theology, it's heavy, and it's yelling. It's a lot of shouting. And when you read through their work, most of the time it follows this same wavelength that Rohr is emphasizing of the anger, that there's injustice, that this is wrong, people are hurting, there is corruption, there is oppression, and it's breaking us, and it makes us just weep and fall to our knees. And it's when we fall to our knees that we see the people around us on their knees, and we can rise together.
Yeah. I think the word prophet is a dangerous word, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe for good reason, right? The dangerous certainly to empire, um, dangerous to injustice. A good prophet is fighting the good fight, and the word prophet can also be something that anyone could co-opt and say, I'm prophesying to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking the words of God. God is speaking through me. God told me this. And I'll be honest, Dani, that language is so tricky.
Mm-hmm.
I actually mean that. I don't. I'm not just criticizing it. I'm actually saying that is really tricky language. I want I want to be able to hear the whispers of the divine in the space between us, or in the breeze, or in insights, or in I want to be able to hear whispers of the divine. But
Mm.
the moment I claim I can hear whispers of the divine, it becomes dangerous, doesn't it? Like mostly because that language, that concept, has been used to hurt and abuse so many people over, not like every once in a while, like systematically over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over. And it is such normal language in abusive environments where, well, this is just the way God says it's supposed to be. Trust me. Like
Mm.
that, man. Like, and I actually ask you, as a pastor, as somebody who I think has wrestled with faith in a number of different ways, like how do you encounter the voice of God? How does it empower you? How do you guard against claiming divine authority
Mm.
when you and I are just as uncertain, unclear, clueless as everybody else? Sorry to put that on you. You're not. You're
Yeah,
not. But
I
I
feel
am.
clueless most
Yeah.
days. Uh, if you watch The Office, a Michael reference of most times I start a sentence and I don't know where it's going to go. I just hope I find myself along the way.
Yeah.
Like that's life, right?
Yeah.
If I could
Yeah.
summarize most of us living our
Yeah.
day-to-day lives, like we start and we we hope we get somewhere with it. Um anyways, oh man, I could go on and on and on about this specific topic. And I hope whoever's listening right now truly does take this to heart, that God speaks directly to every single person in different ways, in different manners. I think people are constantly seeking God's guidance, constantly seeking God's voice, myself included, that sometimes we we want something so tangible that we crave to, seek out a pastor, a priest, a psychic, a medium, someone who can speak on behalf of the divine to us. And while I'm not going to diminish any of those titles that I just listed, I will say there is a great importance and emphasis in that discerning process and discerning the voice. Because as a pastor, I've had people come to me saying they've heard the voice of God for my ministry and have told me things that do not align. I just nod usually and say, that's odd. And there's a misalignment, and that misalignment is the true voice of God. We all have that, true north, that compass, God within us that is guiding us in our life's journey. And there are other people who see our potential, who see who we are, and also have their own human agendas that they can also put within the prophecy that they're presenting to you. Uh, so my biggest emphasis there is just be wary of what other people say to you on behalf of God. Even I have to check myself all the time, because there are situations with, people a part of the churches that I serve where I want to speak on behalf of God, where I want to pray for the miracle, for the healing, for all of those things. And I also have to recognize that I'm not God. And I thank God that I'm not God, but I can be a vessel of light, of love, and hope, and also a vessel of empowerment. I want to empower people to the point that they know they can hear equally as much from God as I can hear from God.
Man, that is, if I want people to know something from their encounters with between, it's that they have permission, because I think a lot of people have never been given permission before. They have
Mm-hmm.
permission to hear, uh, to hear God in whatever key makes sense to them, whatever key they're tuned into, whatever, you know what I mean? Like whatever
Mm-hmm.
resonance, whatever channel, whatever frequency makes sense to them. I think, I think we can access God in so many ways. A lot of people, um, well, often when I explain what between's about, right? The space between us is sacred. I believe that, uh, in our interactions, that God, we can meet our understanding of God in our interactions. I believe that's one of the easiest and most efficient ways to encounter the divine. And people will be like, well, I encounter the divine out in nature. I encounter the divine while singing in church. I'll be like, yeah, heck yeah, me too. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's not like the only, I want to invite people into this space, the space between us. Because I think we don't think about it enough as a sacred space. It's certainly not the only place. I do think it's a really rich place to encounter something sacred, something holy. But I think I'm saying this, Dani, to say that um, every prophet seemed like just another uh, random voice, another crazy person in their time to the people around them, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
at least to the people around them who didn't agree with him.
Yeah.
Every prophet, including today, there are people who are speaking prophetically and doing prophetic work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I don't know that Richard Rohr would agree with me when I say this, so I'm just going to say it. I'm not even sure I agree with myself. I'm going to say it. I,
Mm.
th- I think, I think what makes something prophecy or not is when it's offered to the world and we humans collectively decide over time about the truth of it. Because I don't think that
Mm.
decision, that collective decision happens logically. I don't think it's or it happens based on market forces, or it happens based on the winds of the current moment. It happens based on, I think, some tuning into a universal truth that we all collectively know. This is King's,
Mm.
the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, and it's a long arc. It takes a long time for us to get to that. But like that arc is the frequency of truth, and that arc is the frequency upon which true prophecy ends up landing and ends up tuning into. And so maybe it's okay to say this might be prophetic. This feeling, this message that I feel like I'm
Mm.
supposed to give to the world might be prophetic, and also know that I don't know. I'd be curious from a biblical historian someday. Did Isaiah know? Did everybody agree collectively while Isaiah was walking the earth that Isaiah was a prophet? No way. No way. Isaiah was a minority, right? Like a minority
Mm-hmm.
voice, a quiet, uh, deafened voice. The society, the empire around all these prophets. Jesus was not real popular, you guys. Jesus didn't have like he was not the hottest influencer on TikTok in his day. Jesus was a prophet, which meant that he was a tiny, tiny, tiny voice that ended up capturing that frequency of truth over time.
Mm-hmm.
That uh, that sang to us as maybe as God's people, right? I don't know if any of that makes sense. I'm just rambling a little bit, but I'm trying to figure out what the heck a prophet is in today's world. Is that even a word we should be using, or is it
Mm.
too dangerous? I think that's what I'm just trying to wrestle with a little bit, Danny.
Oh, is it too? I think it's too dangerous if we hold it to the definition that our culture is giving to it. I think the true prophecies are the ones right beneath our noses, right within our hearts, that our minds will never capsulate. Because that's not the intention of a prophecy. That's not the intention of being a prophet. It's not for most followers on TikTok. Uh, it's for that pilgrimage. It's for that day in and day out, uh, the grit, the grind, the frustration, the tension. Because I do love when Rohr in this book, he talks about specifically Ezekiel and how Ezekiel had to have this transformation of the heart, had to move from his mind into his heart. Oh, there's a quote by Rohr. I'm gonna try and I know I'll try and thumb through it and I can't find it, but so I'm gonna try and summarize it because I used it in my sermon this last Sunday, and it was for the untransformed ego. Religion is the most dangerous because it gives full permission for us to enslave and segregate and inflate the ego. And I love when I think of prophets, when I think of prophecy, I think of ego as well. How our ego and our prophetic inner voice are constantly in tension with one another. That the ego is always trying to inflate, to segregate, to do all those things that make the ego feel good. Whereas the prophet within you, the prophetic voice of your heart, of your soul, is going to rub up against that ego on a day in and day out situation.
Whew. And wow, Danny, I'm going to go further and say my ego is informed primarily by fear. and
Oh.
it is a defense mechanism against all that I fear. And the prophetic voice inside me that I might feel, or whatever name I want to attach to that, but the prophetic voice, I believe, is informed by compassionate, deep love. But Rohr would name that sadness. His message is that it's not until sadness enters the picture, like deep sadness, not just about a bad thing that happened, but deep sadness about the human condition, sadness about the experience of life.
Mm-hmm.
This informs us in a way that helps us see through more compassionate eyes. And that's what feeds the prophetic voice. That's what feeds the truth of that prophetic voice. I think Rohr would agree with that. There's a maybe that's something for us to explore, Dani, on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
Rohr did write, "You don't think yourself into crying. You cry yourself, if you will allow, into daring new ways of thinking and feeling. You don't think yourself into crying. You cry yourself into new ways of thinking." And I mean, I can certainly think about moments of my life, moments when I lost a friend, that was more than just about losing a friend. It was about like having my whole world shaken and suddenly encountering grief in a new way and suddenly opening my eyes to so many people around me who also were experiencing grief, not just for the loss of that person, but for the loss of all the people in their like suddenly I remember being shaken to the core. I'm in my 20s and suddenly like realizing, oh my God, everybody is always losing people. Like that realization was such a breathtaking. Uh, I didn't want to learn that. Why would I want to learn that? I didn't want to know that. I didn't want to know that everybody around me is always losing people, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody around me will always lose people, and there is no escaping that. Like what a and it transformed the way that I saw people. Like I really think it changed. That fed my prophetic
Mm-hmm.
voice inside. Uh, you don't think yourself into crying. You cry yourself into seeing the world in a different way, into new ways of thinking and feeling. Certainly, I went through a long period of depression in my life, and out the back end of that, uh, it wasn't like everything was better. It was like everything was now coated with a layer of having experienced true darkness. And that layer doesn't ever go away. And I think anybody who's ever experienced anything like that knows that that layer doesn't go away. And if you think it did, you're not looking through that angle of your eyes. I think it's still there. That layer doesn't go away. It helps you see a new version of truth. I keep thinking of like the metaphor for me is, on like fancy movie cameras, they put those filters, they'll put a filter in to create a different, I don't know, ambiance in the scene. And then they'll put a different filter in. And these filters like show us the scene in a different way. And I think over the course of our lives, sadness, but not like just sadness, like existential,
Yeah.
the big stuff, like the stuff where we're seeing underneath the false pleasantness of every particular
Mm-hmm.
day and seeing underneath to something more beautiful, actually, something sadder and more beautiful, sadder and
Mm-hmm.
more full and more real. I think that's a little bit about what Rohr's talking about. I wonder if you
Mm-hmm.
relate to any of that at all.
Oh, Matt, I could literally burst into tears just listening to what you explained and what everyone, no one is exempt from that experience. And, if you're listening and you haven't been through that experience, there's a yet in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sweetness that is also in that darkness that doesn't make sense until you've been through it. That doesn't make sense until you've traveled through the valley of the shadow of death, that then you come out on the other side, as you said, and life is forever changed for the better because you now hold space within yourself for both to coexist, for there to be a rife of devastation as much as there is a ripe of joy in the world. I'll tell you, after our last podcast, Matt, I talked about, all these, as a pastor, you're constantly asked to pray. You're constantly asked to come alongside people in their devastations and in their journey. And, this is my first full year as an ordained minister in a full-time position, holding that. And for a while, I started guarding my heart to protect myself, because I was like, I just weep. All I do is weep. And I became so fearful, as you said, of what if this happens to my family? What if this happens to my children, to my husband, to my parents, to, me? And I started guarding myself to the point that I wasn't able to truly be the authentic minister that I'm called to be, because my ego was protecting myself, rightfully so. And what I found just in the last month since our, I'd like to say it was a podcast episode, it felt more therapeutic for me in our episode, but being able to loosen myself and to give myself permission to cry with people, to have that deep compassion rather than immediately jumping to advice or toxic positivity or the resurrection of Christ, but being in the tomb with people and being in the darkness and able to say, oh my gosh, like, this hurts and this is scary and this is sad. And our tears will allow us to heal on the other side. I want to give a short story. The other day, I've been recognizing this within myself of like allowing myself to feel more the tragedies of the world while not letting them consume me to the point of paralyzation. But the other day, I was taking the trash out around the backside of our house, and we have beautiful big trees in our backyard and tons of squirrels, which most people are like, oh, but we love watching the squirrels. And as I'm coming back into the house, I look on the ground and it's a baby squirrel. And it was the day after Colorado Spring. We had just had a tumultuous wind and a freeze, and the poor baby squirrel was there on the ground. And I screamed, first of all, because it scared me to pieces. And I immediately burst into tears. And then I went back inside to get a bag to put the squirrel in to take back to the trash. And as I'm coming out, the mama squirrel, what I'm assuming, was right there on the fence, staring at the squirrel and staring at me. And I cried like the biggest baby, because it was a moment of the tears of things, that mama was acknowledging me, taking her baby. And 7 weeks ago, prior to the podcast, I probably would have just tied the squirrel up, threw it away. But because I allowed myself to feel fully, that now when we go out and sit on our back patio, there's a different appreciation for the life of a squirrel.
I kind of want to cut out all the rest of this conversation, Dani, and just post you telling a story of that squirrel and that mother squirrel. That's the heart of this. That is you noticing a truth because you were looking through eyes coated in tears. What a profound little anecdote. I'm glad you shared that, Dani. I'm a little shook by it. I'll be honest with you.
But it's those moments that I want everyone to experience. And you like to awaken to this reality that we're not just human beings with these day-to-day tasks and these burdens of life, but we're a part of this creation, this huge creation that goes far beyond just our own lenses. But when we allow ourselves to take our own lenses off and see through the eyes of a squirrel what they're experiencing in this life, through the eyes of our neighbor, through the eyes of our coworkers that drive us crazy, through the eyes of our children, and through the eyes of our aging parents, that's when life becomes full.
There is a also through the eyes of our enemies, and through the eyes of the people that we're angry with, and through the eyes of the people we find to be disgusting and challenging and doing the worst things. Like this is not easy. This idea of prophetic seeing. Maybe I'll offer this quote to bring us closer to a close. Rohr talks about universal love. He talks about all the prophets leading, the stories of the prophets leading toward a universal love, starting in anger, moving through tears, and then developing compassion such that it is absurd, compassion that is unreasonable, compassion that is universal. Here's the quote. The prophets want us to love God above all else and be loved by God above all other partners, which will and must lead to a universal love, the kind that sets out to rescue those we'd much rather condemn. That is the prophet's hard-won conclusion, their tear-filled victory. Man, a universal love because we see through the eyes that have known sadness. And listeners out there have certainly known sadness. And maybe this conversation, Dani, can be an invitation to empower a listener to know the gift of those tears without making that statement sound like toxic positivity that we've named a number of times, but no, like the gift of wisdom that those tears bring. I don't wish those tears for anybody. I don't wish sadness upon anybody. I'd never want that experience, anybody to have that experience, and we all will. Hard stop. And when we do, if we allow our hearts to be open, if we allow our ego to be set aside and fear to not take control, I really believe, and I think Rohr spells it out perfectly, I really believe that we can see through eyes that know compassion at a transformational level. Yeah. I liked this book a lot, Dani. I really liked this book. I like talking about this book with you. Any closing thoughts? And I don't know, what's on your heart here at the end of our conversation?
Man, so much tears. I think of what you said there just with universal love. And if I'm trying to wrap my mind around what universal love looks like, it's not any human written confession or creed or doctrine. It's tears and it's laughter. Both of those two can transcend any division that we hold. Tears and laughter.
Man, have you ever laughed so hard you cried, Dani?
Yeah.
There's truth. There's truth in both.
Wow.
There's truth in both.
There's truth in both.
Thanks, Dani. Thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit. This was a lot of fun. Hey, between or out there, you who's listening with your headbuds or your earphones or whatever you got on your head or on your old console radio or in your car, wherever you're listening. Hey, thanks. Really, thanks for spending a little time with us. I hope you're engaging with Between in a way that means something to you. You're invited to engage with Between in as deep a way as you want. You want to help us create stuff at Between? We've got that. You're welcome here. You want to just, I don't know, read our social media posts and tune into a podcast every once in a while? Totally cool too. We're never going to ask you for money. We're not going to ask you to believe what we believe. We don't even need you to be even anywhere close to how we might identify faith-wise. We just want you, honestly, all we want you to do is go have more moments of human connection with people and notice how sometimes when those moments are real, when those moments of interaction and encounter and conversation are have a depth to them, you might notice that they feel sacred, that they feel holy, that maybe something divine is there in the space between you. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'm really glad you're here. Between Church is where you can learn more. Dani, what an absolute delight. I appreciate you.
Thank you.